Mr. Capty,
Yes,
why
sir.
don't you tell us what our overall topic is for this test material, this unit number 1. Overall topic.
That president.
No, you got a sheet here. You got a sheet that I gave you.
Yeah.
Where's that sheet?
So you know my locker didn't work. I had to put it in one of my friend's lockers, and then I was late, so I grabbed this one. I thought this was the black one that you gave me.
Well, there's this remarkable difference in thickness between the one you
Yeah.
have and the one I have.
Well, I'll get used to that since my locker works.
Okay,
now.
so Pudge, tell me what's the overall topic?
It's moving towards independence.
Ah, you forgot the first part.
The American colony.
The American colonies moving towards independence. Now, before we get to our first subtopic, we gotta just kind of prep you up here just a little bit on what's going on in American history, okay? Because I'm guessing in your world history class, you probably didn't get too much to do with the Americas, did you? The colonists, did you? I don't know. Did you talk about the American colonies in world history?
Yeah.
Some of you were listening, and some of you weren't.
It wasn't a very good.
Okay, well, here's the deal, and I could take you back to 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and go from there, but I can't get to where I need to get in the next 2 years if I do that. It's impossible. So basically, here's where we're setting. We have 13 American colonies, right, that are governed by who, Ms. Voss? Who's governing these colonies? Very good, Great Britain. And the name of the government that runs Great Britain is Parliament. Okay, Parliament. So the governing body that's making laws that affect the American colonies, all 13 of them, is Parliament. Okay? Now, you got to remember that the American colonies were not the only possessions that Great Britain had in 1763. By 1763, Great Britain's empire circled the entire world. They had conquered countries, so to speak, and had governmental properties over countries all over the world by 1763. So the American colonies were just a little bit of their entire area that they conquered. That might be good to write down, okay? So by 1763, Great Britain's empire was established all over the world. It wasn't just the 13 American colonies. You wouldn't believe how many people think that. That, oh gee, Great Britain had the 13 colonies and that was it. They had possessions all over the world. Now, if you're a country, Miss Denise, and you have countries that you have conquered now rule all over the world, what might be a difficulty in that? What might be difficult about having all of this property? If I live in Worland and I have a house in Bozeman, Montana, and Phoenix, Arizona, and Syracuse, New York, and Dallas, Texas, and Ontario, Canada, and Sitka, Alaska, what might be some problems I have owning all those properties?
Being able to watch over.
Yeah, being able to watch over them and make sure everything going on in those particular properties is going the way I want it. So one of the biggest problems Great Britain's going to have from 1763 on is keeping track or keeping control of all of these properties that they have all across the world. Now, one of the biggest problems they're going to have in keeping control of their properties is going to be the 13 American colonies, okay? That's one of the areas that's going to be of specific concern to Great Britain to keep control of. Now, I don't know why this is, but my senior class last year, for some reason, remember a fellow by the name of Count Verzen, who is on your ID sheet, Count Verzen, so that would be important. Kind of funny because we were talking about that on Friday and they all remembered who Count Verzen was. And that's kind of interesting to me because that's like the first thing we talked about when they were juniors. Now, there's a great thing about Count Verzen. He was a French official. Had nothing to do with Great Britain, had nothing to do with the American colonies. Count Verzen was a French official. But he was interested in the American colonies. He was very interested in the American colonies. And in 1863, he made this quote. Now, sometimes I'll give you quotes and I'll say, don't worry about it, don't write them down. And sometimes I'll give you quotes and tell you that you need to write them down. This is one you need to write down, and I'll repeat it several times. And maybe the reason why these seniors remember Count Rosanius because I made him write down this quote, but I just thought it was odd they remembered this particular individual. But I want to give you a quote that he gave concerning the American colonies. So I'll read this several times and you write down the quote. Quote, "The American colonies stand no longer in need of England's protection." The American colonies stand no longer in need of England's protection. The American colonies stand no longer in need of England's protection. England will call on them. The American colonies stand no longer in need of England's protection. England will call on them to contribute towards supporting the burden they have helped to bring on her. The American colonies stand no longer in need of England's protection. England will call on them to contribute towards supporting the burden they have helped to bring on her. The American colonies stand no longer in need of England's protection. England will call on them to contribute towards supporting the burden they have helped to bring on her, and they will answer by striking off all dependence. I'll repeat that several times on our first one here. The American colonies stand no longer in need of England's protection. Everybody got that? England will call on them to contribute toward supporting the burden they have helped to bring on her. England will call on them to contribute towards supporting the burden they have helped to bring on her. And they will answer by striking off all dependence. And they will answer by striking off all dependence. Read that again. The American colonies stand no longer in need of England's protection. England will call on them to contribute towards supporting the burden they have helped to bring on her. And they will answer by striking off all dependence. And they will answer by striking off all dependence. Okay, one more time to make sure you have it. Here's the quote. The American colonies stand no longer in need of England's protection. England will call on them to contribute towards supporting the burden they have helped to bring on her, and they will answer by striking off all dependence. Everybody got that down? If you don't, let me know. Now, let's go through that. Dominic, my man, first sentence. The American colonies stand no longer in need of England's protection. What is he saying? What's he mean by that? Right, the 13 colonies do not need England to protect them anymore. This is what he said in 1763. Miss Timmons, how about the second sentence? England will call on them to contribute towards supporting the burden they have helped to bring on her. Think about what they're saying here. Think deep. England will call on them. Who's them? American colonies. To contribute towards supporting the burden. How are they going to contribute, and what's the burden? They're going to pay, not them off, but they're going to pay. And what's the burden England has developed, Connor, on itself? If they're asking them to pay for a burden that they brought on upon themselves, what do they need?
Money.
Money for what? Anybody know what they need money for?
To pay off their war debts.
Perfect. Yeah, that boy. To pay off their war debts. You think it was free conquering all these countries? England has a tremendous war debt. Tremendous war debt. And now they're going to ask the American colonies to help pay off that war debt. Does that make sense? Now here's the third one here, Wyatt. It says, and they will answer by striking off all dependence. Okay, who's they?
British.
Colonies.
The colonies are going to answer. They're going to answer by striking off all dependence, which means they're going to want their independence. Okay, they're going to strike off dependence. If you strike off dependence from me, you don't believe that I need to help you do anything. You're not dependent upon me. So let's think about that quote one more time. The American colonies stand no longer in need of England's protection. They've established themselves. They've done very well on their own, even though they're under British rule. They're doing really good, financially and otherwise, right? So because of that, they don't need England's protection. England will call on them being the colonies, to contribute towards supporting the burden they have helped to bring on her. They're going to want England, they're going to want the colonies to help pay that huge war debt they have because of the conquering they've done around the world. Okay? And the final quote is, and they, being the colonies, will answer by striking off all dependence, which means they're going to want their independence. Now you think about a prophecy or a predictor. 13 years after Count Verzane made this prediction, what happened? 1763 and 13 is 1776. What did the American colonies do in 1776, Ms. Voss? What did they do in 1776? They did. They declared their independence from Great Britain. Count Verzane predicted that 13 years before it happened. I think that is absolutely remarkable that this Frenchman, who really had nothing to do with Great Britain or the colonies, but was just interested in the American colonies, could predict the future 13 years ahead. He knew what was going to happen. Okay, that's going to take us to our first subtopic, Cody, which is what?
Problems faced by the British in governing their empire.
Right, problems faced by the British in governing their empire. I told you they're going to have problems, right? Because I have all this land everywhere and I got to keep track of it. Well, I'm going to give you the 4 major problems that Great Britain had to deal with in governing this vast empire. I own all this land everywhere I talked about, right? And here's some problems the British are going to have to deal with, okay? What's that? 4 major ones, yeah. Now you can bet when I put something like this, it's probably going to be on the test, so pay attention. Okay, Miss Franck, because you're awesome. What, in general, talking about my particular situation, where I own all this property all over the world, what might be a problem I have in owning all of it? Okay, I can't take care of it. That's a good overview, but why might I not be able to take care of it? It's a good guess. You can't be in all those places at once. Okay, how about anything else that might cause me a problem? If you dig deeper than that, dear, I'd have to be pretty what to keep track of all that stuff. But, well, rich, well, I'm not very rich, actually. I'm damn poor because I'm asking the American colonies here pretty quick for money because I spent everything. So what else? What would I have to be to make that work besides have the money? What would I have to be if I was going to keep track of that and that and that and that and that? I'd have to be well. Say it. You were going to say it. I'd have to be well organized. I'd have to be kind of a good leader, would I not? I'd have to be well organized. Well, the first major problem that Great Britain faced in governing this vast empire is they had a weakness of British leaders. That's a bad combo. You got all this vast area to take care of, and your leadership is bad. So a weakness of British leaders was the first major reason why Great Britain was going to have trouble governing this vast empire they put together. Okay, by 1763, it was very evident that the leadership in Great Britain was poor, very poor. Now, think about this a little bit. The leaders that were serving Great Britain at that time in 1763 lacked 3 ideals that you need to be a successful leader. They lacked 3 ideals. Now, if Mr. Sanford is going to be the principal of this school, do you think he just graduated from high school and said, hey, I want to be the principal? And they said, you betcha, and they brought him in here and let him be the principal? What did he need to be the principal? What do you need to get a diploma?
College degree.
No, to get a diploma out of here.
Graduate.
What do you need to graduate?
High school education.
Yeah, very good. Okay, the leaders in Great Britain lacked education. They did not have a quality, broad education. They weren't well educated. If you're not very well educated, could Mr. Sanford be the principal coming right out of high school here? No, because he didn't take any classes that would make him principal ready, right? Well, these guys were not very well educated. Do you have a question, dear?
Yeah, so is this one before?
No, we're still on the first one. Weakness of British leaders. I'm just telling you that there's three reasons, three ideals that these leaders didn't have. And one of them is they weren't very well educated. Okay, you can't do a very good job if you're not very well educated. Now, Mr. Sanford's in an interesting position here because he has to find solutions to satisfy two groups of people in this school. Who are the two groups of people that he has to find solutions for? Students and teachers. Very good. Well, in order to be a good leader at this time when you have this much land in your empire, you have to be able to find solutions to satisfy the need of the colonies and of your own country in general. And none of these leaders that Great Britain had the ability to find solutions for either their own country, let alone the American colonies. Weren't very well educated, weren't good If you're going to be a principal in a high school, you got to be able to solve a lot of problems. Jesus, everybody's got a problem. And you got to solve. Well, I don't have enough money for this. Or gee whiz, Billy's not acting up in my class. Or doggone it, I just can't, I don't have enough desks in my room. And son of a gun, it's so cold in there, the kids, I mean, all Mr. Sanford does all day long is solve problems. That's what he does. And he gets pulled in 100 different directions. Well, if you're going to be a good leader, you got to be able to do that. You got to be able to be pulled in 100 different directions and solve problems for people. Well, these British leaders couldn't solve problems within Great Britain, let alone the American colonies or any of these other possessions they owned around the world. Does that make sense to you? Do you see what I'm saying on that? Bad leaders, okay? Now, anybody know how England was ruled at the time? Did they have a president of the United Kingdom? They had a monarchy. Very good, Connor. What's a monarchy? You have a king and queen. You have royalty. Okay? That doesn't mean you have to know anything. It's just a bloodline. Okay? So if Cody is the grandson of the King of England, I'm not saying this is you, but no matter how smart or unsmart he is he going to take over the crown someday? He is. That's the problem with the monarchy. Is there any democracy in there? Is anybody voting on who gets to run the country? No. They do vote on who gets into Parliament, just like we vote on who gets into Congress, but it would be like the first president, George Washington's family, has ruled the United States of America for all these years because it's a bloodline. You could get some dopes in there, could you not, that are running the country. So, King George III was the King of England. He's on your ID sheet. King George III was the King of England during this particular time. He served from 1760 to 1820, even serving after the Revolutionary War. So the leader of Great Britain at the time that we're talking about, of 1763, was King George III, which tells you there was a King George II and a King George I. You see how the monarchy works, okay? Now, just like the President of the United States, Maria, King George III was surrounded by ministers. Okay, now, we have a little different definition, Maria, for ministers. Maybe now you think of, when I say minister, what do you think? Clergy? Right? Like a church, right? Well, these ministers were kind of like President Trump's aides. He has aides, right? He has a cabinet, and that's part of his aides, and he has all kinds of different aides. Well, what they called the people that helped out the king in those days, his aides, they called them ministers, which is on your ID sheet. Now, I'll kind of go way ahead maybe to next year. John F. Kennedy, 35th President of the United States, had a lot of aides. Anybody know who his most important aide was, the one that he turned to the most? The one, I mean, you have lots of aides. Which one did he turn to the most?
Wasn't it his brother?
Very good. His brother, Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy was John Kennedy's Attorney General. And he had no legal experience at all when he appointed him. He did not have any experience as a lawyer, and all of a sudden now you're the top-ranked lawyer in the country. And people said, well, my God, why in the world would you have your brother be the Attorney General? He has no experience. you'll have to understand someday the Kennedy wit, because they even wrote books about the Kennedy wit where John Kennedy could come back with a quick answer. And he says, I don't understand your problem. He says, I don't see what's wrong with giving Bobby some legal experience as Attorney General before he goes out in the world and practices law. Well, that was the top position you would ever be in. But why did he pick him? Why did he pick his brother despite the fact he had no experience at all, Brianna? Why would he pick his brother? He trusted him, very good. That's very good. What else? There are 3 reasons he picked him. You got the first one perfect, he trusted him. Kenley, what might be another reason he picked him? If he trusted him, he'd be loyal, would he not? He was loyal. But more importantly, Miss Swing, what would he do? And this is important if you have friends or you have people that are going to be asking your opinion. This is maybe the most important thing other than trust and loyalty. What would he do to his brother? He would tell him what he thought no matter what. He wasn't interested in pleasing his brother or making his brother be his friend. He would give him an honest answer every time. I think that's a bad idea. Well, King George didn't have those type of ministers. What type of ministers did he have around him? Those that tried to please him. And that does not work. If you're going to be an aide to a leader, you have to be able to give them an honest answer. And your goal, like the goal of this high school, should be that students are the first priority at Worland High School. Every decision we make, from the lowest paid employee to the highest paid employee in this school district, ought to be in the best interest of you kids. Every decision should be in the best interest of you, which, whatever, I won't get into that. But if you're a minister or an aide for a leader, you need to make sure that your leader does things that are in the best interest of the citizens that live in that country. Unfortunately for King George III,